Welcome. My name is Ryan Wexelblatt, otherwise known as ADHD Dude. This is Beyond Organizing Binders, helping your child improve executive functioning and independence. So a few things to get started. The first thing I'm going to ask a huge favor here. If you can just refrain from, typing in the chat box while the presentation's going on. The only reason why is because it distracts me a little bit, and I don't want to slow the presentation down, especially since I've already taken up 15 minutes of your time and you've been so patient. I will answer as many questions there are at the end. So feel free to just, hold your questions to the end. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, but the first thing I want to explain here is that executive function challenges are for the most part not diagnosis specific. So while I am known as ADHD Dude and I specialize in ADHD, the material I'm going to present tonight will be very applicable to families of kids with Asperger's or higher verbal autism spectrum diagnoses. I do vary the things that I teach. And the scaffolding I teach parents, based on a kid's diagnostic profile. And I also just want to mention that I do not have experience working with kids who present with traumatic brain injuries or moderate to lower verbal autism or more pronounced intellectual disabilities. So I just wanted to make that clear. All right. So I want to tell you a little about myself. So because you can't see me, this is me. So my name is Ryan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a school social worker, used to be also a school adjustment counselor, but I let my Massachusetts certification lapse because I haven't lived there in 19 years. I'm also a certified ADHD professional, and I am father to a 22-year-old who you see in the picture here with me. His name is Austin, and he has some learning differences and also executive function challenges. I am the founder of ADHD Dude as well as Trip Camp. I create content for Attitude Magazine's ADHD and Boys section, and I also have a YouTube channel called ADHD Dude as well as a Facebook group. So I want to tell you a little bit how I got into this field. Also, let me backtrack for a minute. I also kind of have a connection to the area. I had worked at a summer camp in Middleborough for 3 summers. I actually went to camp at Wellesley College, so I kind of have a long history up there. So I know the area a bit. And then I lived there for 2 years. I worked in Belmont Public Schools. I lived in Watertown. So I've always kind of had this connection to the area. So I got into this because, I went to school for my master's in social work. I came out of working in special ed right away, had no idea what executive functioning is, didn't even hear the word then. And just to kind of give you a little background. So I adopted my son when he was older. He was 8. And, one of the things for kids who go through the foster care system is they tend to have executive functioning challenges. So I did kind of the things that probably a lot of you have done is that I hung lists up around the house. I did a lot of prompting, checklists, those kind of things. And I realized nothing's really working here. So I went out and I got an executive function book. There weren't a ton at the time. And everything in this book was about academic organizational skills. And, my thing was like, this is not going to help me. I want to get out of the house in the morning without screaming at him and without him in tears, because I was working at a school at that time as well. So I found that the resources out there really didn't, help me at the time. Also wanted to mention, I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. I live in right outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey now. So let me give you the basics a little bit about executive functioning. So it's a delay in the development of the prefrontal cortex, or what we call the frontal lobe. Okay, and I like this model here because I think it really encapsulates the various areas of executive functioning really well. So think of executive functioning as really an umbrella term, okay? And what I want to explain to you is if you have a child who's diagnosed with ADHD or you have students diagnosed with ADHD, ADHD is actually a very misleading name, okay, because it doesn't really explain what it is. And by the way, just so you know, ADHD has had a history of horrible names. It was first called like minimal brain disorder, then it was ADD, now ADHD. And I think what it's going to go to eventually is executive function developmental delay. The other thing I want to mention, a lot of terms being used right now, I hear a lot of executive dysfunction or executive function disorder. I just want to clarify that those are not formal diagnoses. So let's talk about what lagging executive function skills look like at home. So the biggest piece is what we would call prompt dependence, meaning that your son or daughter has to be always prompted to do things, always reminded. They look like difficulty of sustaining attention to non-preferred subjects or tasks. So I've had parents say to me, well, I don't think my son has ADHD because, he can play Minecraft for hours or he can build with Legos for 2 hours. And really what ADHD is, it's not difficulty sustaining attention. It's difficulty sustaining attention to non-preferred subjects or tasks. Another aspect is difficulty with future thinking skills. The real term for this is nonverbal working memory. It's how we visualize doing a task in the future. So I'm going to give you an example. If I know when I'm done here tonight, I have to go to the supermarket. I'm picturing going to Shaw's. I'm assuming Shaw's is still around, right? I'm picturing going to Shaw's. I'm picturing where I'm going to park, where the milk is. So how I'm going to go into the store and get the milk. Okay. That's nonverbal working memory. And then verbal working memory is when I get there and I actually do it. So with ADHD, what happens is nonverbal working memory is split from verbal working memory. Okay. Another aspect of executive functioning challenges is difficulty feeling time. So can I just hear in the chat box just a yes if your son or daughter ever spent more time complaining about doing a task than it would actually take? That's something I see a lot, and something my son has done plenty of times. The other thing with difficulty feeling time is that kids with executive functioning challenges don't have a sense of urgency. Okay, so that's the other aspect about feeling time. So lack of situational awareness. So what we often call reading a room, and really the actual term for this is called gestalt processing. It's how we take little pieces of information, put them together as a whole, and make meaning out of them. So give me let's see an exclamation point if your son or daughter has ever crossed a street without looking, because this is something I see all the time with the kids I work with. I run a camp in the summer here, and I've never had a week where I don't have at least one kid who walks into the street without looking or during my school year program. The other piece is difficulty recalling past information and applying it to the present or future, which is called episodic memory. Okay, so I see we have a lot of kids who walk into the street without looking. It's kind of scary, isn't it? Okay, so let's talk about what lagging executive function skills look like at school. So does homework, but doesn't hand it in. Unnecessary papers and trash in backpack and binders. I have found 3-month-old sandwiches in the bottom of kids' backpacks. In June, I found papers from October. A lot of kids with executive functioning challenges have difficulty with reading comprehension, specifically with, summarizing themes, kind of getting the bigger picture. Lots of kids with executive functioning challenges have difficulty with writing because writing is all executive functioning. It's organizing your thoughts in a cohesive format, putting them out on paper and having to think about, does it make sense to somebody else? So lots of kids with ADHD and, can do well, or, other executive functioning challenges can do well with creative kind of freeform writing. It's with structured writing assignments that they struggle with. Okay. The other piece is, thinking assignments will take much longer than they actually will. And the other thing I see with a lot of the kids I work with is they do homework in the exact opposite order that they should. So one of the things I want to tell you is, when I speak to parents a lot into my Facebook group, I find a lot that sometimes parents' frustration is directed at teachers. And what I want you to understand is that, teachers, mental health professionals such as myself, school counselors, get really little to no education in executive functioning. Throughout my graduate program, I never once heard the term used. ADHD was covered in one psychopathology class, for maybe 20 minutes once, if that even. When I took the licensing exam I have the highest level of licensure called licensed clinical social worker. There is one question about ADHD on it. So this is not a topic that people are really educated about. And as a result, there's really widespread misconception that executive functioning means academic organizational skills. Okay. The other thing I want you to understand is that many IEP goals and 504 plans, they're not designed to help cultivate independence or to help your son or daughter become an independent learner. Rather, they further enable prompt dependence on adults. Okay. And that's just a topic I'm going to tell you I'm not going to get into because accommodations are not my area of expertise. But this is something I just always want to make parents aware of. Okay. The other thing, and this drives me crazy as a mental health professional, is I often see mental health professionals, create a speculative narrative to give meaning to executive functioning challenges if they don't understand executive functioning. So some of the things I've heard is, he won't, clean his room because he's angry at being adopted, or, he's resentful of you because you spend more time with his younger brother, and that's why, he doesn't rush to get out the door in the morning, things like that. So this is how executive function skills develop naturally. The way we all develop executive function skills is through unstructured play. I want you to notice that in both of these pictures, there are no adults in these pictures, okay? I want to tell you a story real quick. I went to a very progressive elementary school for a few years when I was younger. And at the school, I don't know what the model is called. I should find out. But at this school, it was on a beautiful wooded campus, big campus, back in the woods. And during recess, there would be no adults outside. So in this model, whatever it was called, the idea was that, let the kids kind of work things out for themselves. And I want to tell you, in the years I was there was never a problem during recess, because kids work things out. So if you ever, went outside when you were younger and kind of played outside until you were told to come home until it got dark out, that's how you actually develop executive function skills as well as social skills. Okay. So, and I really like this one that with the fort, right? Because think about the planning that is involved in that. So many aspects of executive functioning start to get built really from this young age through unstructured play. So I want to talk for a minute about, what has impacted natural executive function skill development. Well, number one, there's a lot of irrational fears for kid safety that are not based in data. So, it's not worth getting into right now, but, this idea that, kids are going to be kidnapped at any second has no basis in data. Kids are safer than they ever have been in history right now. Okay. So that's one thing. And as a result, a lot of kids are not having that same amount of unstructured play that, some of us had. And when I say unstructured play, I mean unstructured play that's not where adults are not directing things. Okay. Another thing that's happened is, unfortunately, our society has lost sight often of the importance of being outdoors, playing and hanging out. Overscheduling is another thing that doesn't help kids with executive functioning challenges. Parents hovering, refusing to give kids an age-appropriate amount of autonomy. This is one of the biggest ones I see. Here's another big one is parents abdicating their parental authority towards a more kind of permissive and indulgent parenting style, which leads to excessive screen time. I talk about this in my Facebook group that I believe in the 1990s, the child psychology field kind of shifted to teaching parents, listen to your kids and, kind of, be very diplomatic and let them decide what punishments are, and that has kind of led to a shift in our parenting culture with, kids having excessive amounts of screen time. So really, it's a confluence of all these things gradually becoming normalized in our parenting culture that have not been helpful to kids with executive functioning challenges. One of the things I always talk about is I want to differentiate kids' chronological age from what I call their executive functioning age. So this is a sample developmental chart of a 14-year-old diagnosed with ADHD. So you see, 14, he's where he's supposed to be physically, intellectually. Look at his executive function age. It's 10. Okay. So if you are 14, your executive functioning age is actually more like 12, 11. The reason I put 10 here is because I want you to understand that the more parents act as executive functioning, the more it delays executive function skill development. Okay. So you could have a kid who, intellectually is 16, but their executive functioning age is nowhere near that. But in general, it's 2 to 3 years behind chronological age. Okay, so let's talk about what inhibits and builds executive function skills. So some of the things that inhibits are doing tasks for your child that they're capable of learning to do independently, which is really enabling over dependence, constant prompting or directing, which creates prompt dependence, solving problems for them, so denying them the opportunity to build independent problem-solving skills, because developing problem-solving skills takes a lot of executive functioning. Speaking for them, something that drives me crazy when I see parents order for their 13-year-olds at restaurants. When you speak for your kids, it denies them the opportunity to develop self-advocacy skills. And here's another really big one, and is micromanaging academic performance at the expense of developing independence and building executive functioning. So telling kids what they have for homework, making sure assignments get handed in, and so on. I want to tell you that every year since I've been, in private practice, I start getting phone calls in November from parents of kids who went away to college and they are home now. Sometimes I get the calls in the end of December or January. All right. So here's what builds executive function skills: free play, hanging out without screens, play, hanging out without adult direction, participating in any type of music, art, martial arts, providing scaffolding instead of doing things, teaching visual strategies to help build nonverbal working memory or those future thinking skills, and the use of declarative visual language instead of prompting. So what can happen when executive functioning challenges are not addressed? Well, we talked about prompt dependence, lack of independence, compared to same age peers. I see a lot of parents reach their independence tipping point, decide they no longer want to act as their child's executive functioning, and they become resentful of their child's overdependence and lack of independent problem-solving skills. The other thing I see happen a lot of times with kids with ADHD is around 14 or 15, they kind of reach what I call the inflexibility tipping point. Meaning if their inflexibility is kind of been accommodated, and that's when they really become resistant to accepting help, yet can still be over-dependent on their parents. So I want to ask, can you just give me an exclamation point if you've tried any of these without success? So things like the timer with the red in it, that vibrating watch, checklists, reward charts, setting reminders on Alexa. Has anybody tried over any of those things without results, or I should say without long-term results with those things? So if you have, the reason why is, they don't work. And by the way, the thing here, up here, this is it's an FDA approved video game that it's designed to build concentration. And I will tell you, Dr. Russell Barkley, who's kind of the godfather of ADHD, he even said he doesn't understand why the FDA, approved this or approved it so quickly. So these things don't work. I'm going to explain why in a little bit. So again, here's what does work: making time visual scaffolding to build future thinking skills. Here's a really important one: incentivizing getting through non-preferred tasks, using visual declarative language, applying if-then thinking to teachable moments. So what that's like is, if you, did this before this way and it saved you time, then wouldn't it benefit you to do it again that way? Keep in mind, kids with ADHD live in the moment. They're not great at recalling past information typically, unless they're not great at recalling past information unless there's a strong emotion attached to it. Previewing or front loading helps. And here's a really big one for those of you who have high schoolers or middle schoolers. Allowing for natural consequences. Experiencing natural consequences does help many kids, I would say most, to help build executive functioning. And really the biggest thing is you making a commitment to stop acting as his or her executive functioning. This is what visual scaffolding looks like. This is, I did this with a boy he was in 6th grade at the time. Now I don't want you just to go and do this, because really what's important here is the way we use language with this. But the reason lists don't work is because they're not visual. Kids have to see themselves going through a sequence of steps or doing the task, in order to help direct their behavior. Lists are not visual, and the reality is that, where a list is, the things on that list are happening in a different space than where the list is. That's the other reason it's not helpful. This is not visual scaffolding. So I just want to be really clear about this. okay, because you can't see yourself doing these tasks. And this generation in particular really learns visually. I mean, where do they go when they want to learn something? YouTube. So as I mentioned, planning often happens in a separate physical space from where a task is executed. And as a result, it can be difficult to recall that plan in your head when you're physically in a different space than where the planning occurred. So here's why listed reward charts don't work, because the future is an abstract concept for kids with ADHD. Remember, kids with executive functioning challenges live in the moment, okay? Difficulty recalling past experiences unless there's a strong emotion attached to them, and difficulty with future thinking. So what I want you to see here, okay, this is how long kids can think, kids or young adults or adults can think into the future. This is people without executive functioning challenges. Executive functioning is not fully developed until around, between I usually say between 24 and 26. For somebody with ADHD, subtract 2 to 3 years from this. Okay. And by the way, this is from Sarah Ward. It just so happens that the two people who I've learned the most from about executive functioning are not directly in your area, but close. Sarah Ward's practice, efpractice.com. They are in Concord. And Linda Murphy, whose book I'll mention later, she's in the North Shore in Beverly. Yeah. Okay, so I want to just show you, some strategies that I use. So this is, part of incentivizing getting through non-preferred tasks. So tangible rewards and incentives that are congruent with their ability to visualize the future. I want to go back to this for a minute, okay? So I did this, what I'm showing you next, I did this with a boy when he was in 5th grade, okay? So if you're in 5th grade, you can kind of look at maybe a day and a half, you can think ahead to the future. So this is the things that we put together he wanted to earn depending on the time of day to help him, get through homework and get through chores, okay? So kids need an incentive to help direct their behavior to a goal-directed behavior, okay? So what I want you to understand is that, people always often say to me, well, I don't think they should be rewarded for taking out the trash or rewarded for finishing homework. It's not about rewarding them. It's about we have to motivate them by incentivizing, something to look forward to at the end of the non-preferred task, whatever it is. So I did this with an 11th grader. It's for a way for him to scaffold his homework time with incentives. So what I do with kids, I teach that you should do homework in the order for you personally. It goes from most boring or hardest for your brain to get through to easiest. So for him, English was most challenging to get through. So he would do English. Then his reward for that would be to watch one episode of Robot Chicken, which is 15 minutes. Then he would do social studies and science and a 5-minute non-screen break, right? So he wouldn't get sucked into YouTube. Then math and entrepreneurship. So here's the really important part. So if he finished his homework before 9, okay, he would earn himself 60 minutes of game time, okay? And if he finished after 9, then he got one show on the DVR, okay? And this is a game he played Football Manager, so that's why that picture's there. Okay, let me go back to this for a minute. Again, I want to mention, most kids I see do homework in the exact opposite order. And what I teach kids is when you do that, you're taking away your own free time. What I want to tell you is, one of the big problems I see in the ADHD coaching field and the executive function field is that so much there, number one, is just focused on academic organizational skills. The other problem that I often see is that it's really kind of, the stuff that's out there is really kind of geared to kids who are highly academically motivated. And that's not a lot of the kids I work with, okay? So how I sell this to kids, the strategies I teach is I say, if you use what I'm teaching you, you will have more free time to yourself. And they figure out that they actually do, okay? So front loading, okay? Front loading is when we prepare kids for what's coming up or what they're going to learn, okay? Notice here how I'm using visual language. So here's what today's going to look like. We're going to grandma's house and we will leave here around 10. After that, we will be running some errands. We will not be going into GameStop while we're in the shopping center. That is from my own personal experience. I came up with that one because I had to used to do this with my son, because if I didn't front load and tell him you're not going into GameStop, then there'd be a blow up. So the other really important thing I want you to take from this, okay, is that in all the executive functioning materials I've ever looked at, so when I'm talking about the bestsellers on Amazon, okay, the best-selling ADHD books, there is no discussion about language in them. And language is the foundation to improving executive functioning. So I want to tell you, even though I'm I have my I went to school for clinical social work, most of the training I've done comes from the speech language pathology field. Almost all the work I use is not from the mental health field. Okay, it's from the speech language pathology field. And what I teach parents is this, that, if you have ADHD, ADHD is a learning issue. It is not a mental health issue. The mental health field still treats it as a mental health issue. And that's why therapy tends to not work for kids with ADHD. Okay, because it's not a mental health disorder. It's a learning issue. It's learning how to, strategies to make up for lagging executive function skills, lagging, social skills. So, my whole methodology is about moving ADHD, into the 21st century, seeing it as a learning issue. So we're not pathologizing kids with labels, okay, and helping them understand ADHD in a way that's relatable and meaningful, so they're more receptive to learning. So here's another really important aspect, okay, of ADHD. As I mentioned, ADHD splits nonverbal working memory from verbal working memory. So kids with ADHD are lagging in the development of their self-directed talk or their internal dialogue. They have it, they're just not always hearing it, okay? We need to help them develop this inner voice. So when implemented with consistency, the way you use language with your child can significantly help him or her develop his inner voice or his brain coach, okay? So another strategy, we use language to improve self-directed talk. We use visual, declarative language instead of imperative language or prompts. So for instance, if there's a dish left out on the counter, it's not go put the dish in the sink, it's look around the kitchen and figure out what needs to happen. Here's why we do that. If you say go put the dish in the sink, that's prompting. There's no thought process involved in that. If you say look around the kitchen and figure out what needs to happen, then your son or daughter has to think to themselves and say, what does, my mom mean? Or what does my dad mean? What are they talking about? That's how you develop self-directed talk, by helping them develop that internal dialogue by using that kind of language. So if a kid, for instance, doesn't have their lunch bag when they're ready to leave for school, I would say, do you look like you're ready to leave for school? To help kind of, motivate them if they're struggling with, getting through math, I would say something like, imagine having YouTube time when you're done math. That's that incentive there, okay? If they forget their snack at school, I would say, I'm wondering if you'll want your snack at school today. So all this language, right, is moving away from prompting, right, to help develop that inner dialogue. So can I get just type any random number if you've ever said clean your room and your child's room looks like this, okay, and you expect it to go to this, okay? I want to hear anybody who's done that, or there's been arguments about cleaning the room, or they say, I don't know how. I imagine that all of us have done that, or maybe we wind up and go in and start cleaning for them, kind of scaffolding it, okay? I want to explain to you why when you say clean your room and you expect it to go from this to this, and that doesn't happen. I see 1,000 there, or 1,000,000, or I don't even know what number that is. Okay. All right. So here's why. Because they can't, a few reasons. Because he or she can't visualize what the space should look like when it's clean, regardless of how many times you may have prompted him to clean it. Because she doesn't know where to start or what sequence to clean in. And because he has no concept of how long it will take, so he presumes it will take much longer than it will. So here's what I do with kids. Okay, we break up the room into zones to see the space broken up into manageable parts. So what I tell parents is, okay, it's not, clean your room. It's make the bed look like it's supposed to look in the picture. So we have this picture here of what the room is supposed to look like when it's clean. So we can say, make the yellow zone match the picture. Okay, that is much easier and it's much more tolerable, and it's giving them that visual frame of reference to direct their behavior, okay, to what it's supposed to look like. You are more than welcome to follow me on Facebook. ADHD Dude and Trip Camp is my page. You're welcome to join my group. Please make sure to agree to read the rules and read them. YouTube is just type in ADHD Dude on YouTube and click subscribe. If your Instagram's your thing, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, all that. Okay, and here, this is what my Attitude magazine page looks like. And there's a link down there for it. So Attitude, yeah. And they also, Attitude, if you follow Attitude, they'll post my articles and videos on their social media, on their Facebook feed, and everything else. So I have both articles and videos at my Attitude page. Okay. So I do want to mention, I do have a course, a webinar series for parents called Executive Function Crash Course. And in this, it is not about academic organizational skills. It's about providing you with solutions you can implement immediately to address those biggest pain points at home. Here's the list of what I cover in each one. So there is some academic stuff in webinar 5, and I do touch upon it, okay? I do want to mention to you that, almost 2,000 families have participated in at least one of the webinars now. And if you'd like to read reviews, go to the ADHD Dude Google business page, and you can read the reviews there, or on my Facebook business pages as well. Okay? All right. So one more strategy I want to show you before questions. I want to explain to you, and I'm going to touch upon something that I imagine some of you have dealt with, which is difficulty getting off video games or computers. Okay? In school, we teach kids how to tell time. We do not teach kids how to monitor time. Okay, digital clocks cannot teach the passage of time because there's no physical or spatial movement. I want you to think about when you were in school and sitting in a class that was really boring, and you were looking up at the clock in the class, right, watching the big hand, just waiting for it to get to when the class would end. That's actually how you learn to conceptualize time, part of it. Analog clocks can teach the concept of time because they can illustrate unit volume. Digital clocks cannot do that. Timers cannot do that. So please don't use any of these and think it's going to help your child learn how to develop a sense of time, okay? They don't work. And by the way, if any parenting webinar I've taken, or many ADHD pages, or ADHD Facebook groups, this is all I see parents recommend. Use timers, use the timer with the red in it, so on, okay? These things don't work to help you learn to develop a sense of the passage of time. So this is what I mean by showing time in unit volume. So when you say to your son or daughter, just take your laundry downstairs, it'll only take 5 minutes. That means nothing to them, okay? Saying something will take 5 minutes doesn't mean anything. We have to make time visual. So this is what I do. I say, this is how long it will take you to do your chores, right? So when, if you do it without getting distracted, okay, you should be done your chores by the time the clock gets to the end of the green. So this is showing time in unit volume, and this is how we teach how to conceptualize time. Now, for kids who have trouble getting off video games, any of you ever have arguments, explosions when told to get off Fortnite, Minecraft, any of those things? So I teach a strategy for this in webinar number 3. And what we do is we use this clock to help show their screen time, but also to prepare for the transition off of screens into the next thing. And what I call that is future plan time. I will tell you that is probably the thing that I get the most compliments about from the webinar series, because parents can't believe that the kids can actually learn to get off video games without a fight and without an explosion. And the reason why is because it's preparing them to see the transition coming up. They're seeing it visually, and it helps them to visualize that transition coming up. When you say, get off Fortnite, and, your son says, well, I'm in the middle of a match and you're going to mess up my stats and whatever, okay? That might be true, but the other thing is because he wasn't prepared for that transition. You're pulling him out of a preferred task that he's hyper-focusing on, trying to get him probably into a non-preferred task. So that's why. All right. So, in closing, I want to tell you, it is never too late to start improving executive function skills. And, no matter what age your child is, all right? So if you have a child younger than first grade, I say don't start worrying about this stuff yet. You can certainly kind of start with some of the strategies I teach like in webinar 1 and webinar 2. So learning how to use language, creating the visual scaffolding, but it's never too late. So you're welcome to check out the executive function playlist at my YouTube channel. Linda Murphy, her declarative language handbook, it's available from her website, declarativelanguage.com. Excellent book. It's a short read. I highly recommend it. It's also available as an audiobook, and I really like the audiobook. What you're seeing to the right here, this is the work of Sarah Ward and Kristen Jacobson of Cognitive Connections in Concord. This is actually I did with a second grader who had a propensity to, when he was playing and had to go to the bathroom, he would run out of the bathroom without wiping very well. So we use this is called backwards planning, to talk about the steps for pooping here. So we break it up into the getting ready steps, the doing steps, and the done steps, and then get done. Get done is really important, okay? So make sure toilet is flushed, shut the light off, right? If your son or daughter has ever done homework and didn't hand it in, the reason why is because they weren't visualizing this get done step in their head. So this is a strategy I learned from Kristen and Sarah that I use regularly. And if you type in "get ready to do done" online, you'll find other examples of this as well. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your patience with the technical issues here. You can download a PDF of this if you go here. It's subscribepage.com/CPAC. I do want to mention that, I don't bombard people with emails, okay? I'm not into that. Your email address is never going to be shared or sold or anything like that, okay? And again, here's my social media and all that stuff, if you want to follow me. So Sharon asked, therapy, what if a teen is significant in ADHD and also mood disorder, severe depression? Well, what I would say, Sharon, is, that those are mental health issues, and those are something that can be dealt with, through therapy. I will tell you, and this is really important. I want everyone to hear this. So my preferred modality of therapy, which I have training in, is cognitive behavior therapy. Cognitive behavior therapy has shown efficacy for adults with ADHD. It does not work very well for kids with ADHD because, that difficulty with that self-directed talk. And cognitive behavior therapy requires a lot of self-directed talk. The amazing thing is I've never seen this anybody write about this in any, academic, journal articles, but I think that my belief is that's the reason why CBT doesn't always work well for kids with ADHD. So Julie asked, how do we start implementing this with teens? So Julie, what I would say is, you can certainly, go to my YouTube channel. There's hours of free content there. I also make videos for kids that are in the Dude Talk playlist, but I have an executive function playlist, so you can start there. The webinars I will mention are $20 each, and you can buy them individually, so you're not making a big financial commitment. Marcy said, how do you translate these strategies into the current visual learning environment when kids are more independent and need to handle time management without? Okay, so what I will tell you is a lot of the guys I work with are really struggling right now with virtual learning. Okay, I do have actually a webinar for that called Applying the Executive Function Crash Course Strategies to Virtual Learning. But a lot of kids are, they're struggling with it. And part of that, there's so many variables involved I just don't want to get into right now for the sake of time. But there's a lot of variables involved in that. So what I teach is just the things to really make it more tolerable. Michelle said, having major difficulty getting my 10th grader to get up and be a student on remote learning days. I'm hearing that a lot, Michelle. She will lie in her bed with the lights off and go to remote classes like that. So I think, Michelle, I would need a little more context to be able to answer that. I don't know if that's so much an executive functioning issue as it is managing her sleep hygiene. So I just have to have a little more context. What do you recommend to be written into an IEP? So I don't give advice about IEP goals or accommodations, okay, because it's just not my area of expertise. What I will tell you about this is I want to see goals that don't further enable prompt dependence and move kids towards being independent learners. That's what's important to me to see in goals. How much prompting should parents be doing during remote learning? Again, there's so many variables involved in this. I would need to know the age. Is it classes that they're struggling with more? And here's the other thing I want to tell you about, to Laura's question, okay? That when we put all this educational technology out, nobody ever said, is this going to be helpful for kids really, right? And, I kind of have this attitude that if you don't want kids getting distracted, don't give them a Chromebook, right, where they can go on YouTube. I mean, we get distracted as adults with technology. How do we expect kids not to get distracted, okay? I think we have to have some realistic thinking here about this. All right, moving on here. Okay, Daniel said 13-year-old, severe executive functioning issues, quitting everything, extracurricular, struggling at school. Is there a reason? Daniel, I would need to have more context. I can tell you, lots of kids with ADHD have low frustration tolerance. if they don't get something right away. I think that with that, is it's really, are you going to let him quit everything? Or are you going to make certain, activities mandatory and say, for instance, every, quarter at school, you have to be doing an activity of some kind. Okay. And again, that's more of a behavior issue. And that's my next webinar series coming out, actually. Third grade, completing schoolwork through 7 p.m. Needs so many breaks and so distracted. Talk to teachers. Keep referring to special ed home. What I would say is that, the quantity of work is irrelevant. Okay. There is no data that shows that if sitting and doing hours of homework every night makes you a better student. So I think you need to talk to the teachers about reducing the workload. Because what we want, is, I can tell you the school district I grew up does something really progressive. They tell parents that in elementary, middle school, you're only supposed to do 20 minutes per night maximum in each subject. I don't want to see an 8 or 9-year-old in third grade spending hours doing homework. It's not helpful for them. It's toxifying their relationship to school and to doing work. Okay. Age 10 cannot independently transition to next task class during remote learning. I wouldn't expect them to. So hyperfocus on one task or preferred task. I would say, for that, again, this is difficult, but one of the things I would suggest is to incentivize it. Okay. So, keep in mind if they have a little 5-minute break, let them, get up and move around. If they can watch one video with your supervision so they don't get sucked into YouTube, I think that's fine. So Melanie said, I would love more information how to help kids with ADHD plus anxiety. So I will tell you, Melanie, actually in the spring, I'm going to have a webinar coming out about that. I just trained in a really innovative program that really focuses on helping parents. Because the thing is with kids with anxiety or ADHD with anxiety, if you're just treating the kids, but parents are still accommodating anxiety, you're not really helping. I'm not saying you personally, you know what I mean. How do you help kids develop an inner sense of motivation? Is it just repeating these processes? No, repeating processes does not develop inner motivation. It's incentivizing getting through non-preferred tasks, which, I showed those pictures before, what I did with the 5th grader and with the 11th grader. And I teach that in the 4th webinar in my series. So how do we convey that organizational writing struggles to teacher? I hope they would realize it. And you can also explain that, that if they have difficulty with executive functioning, writing is where it's going to be the most prominent. How to get 17-year-old senior interested in college planning. And one of the things I would say for a 17-year-old is that there has to be a level of interest and ownership in this. And if there's not, then it is what it is. One of the things that data has shown us is that, kids with ADHD tend to do better when they start at community college, or they take a part-time course load, or a combination of those both. All right. So you can't force motivation if that's just not where they're at developmentally in terms of the college piece, because there is so much ownership required in that. 15-year-old who blames others for not completing tasks, didn't take responsibility for his role. How can we improve his awareness? So that sounds to me like avoidance. Okay. So I think it's not engaging in the avoidance and just kind of setting the expectation. And I'm giving you a really terse answer here. It's setting the expectation he's expected to do things, not getting sucked into what I call the argument vortex or the reasoning vortex, which I see parents of kids with ADHD do all the time. They try to reason with them to convince them of things, and that's giving attention to negative behaviors, and it's not helpful. And I just had a post about this a day or two ago on my Facebook page. 14-year-old high school freshman, how to get her focus on assignments. We've tried rewards, punishments. So what I would say, Ashley, is that probably those rewards, they're too far into the future. You're going to have to do smaller incentives for things. And again, you might have to change your expectation, because if she's 14, her executive functioning age is about 11 or 12. So what I would say is set your expectation for her motivation at age 11 or 12. And again, this is something that I cover in the 4th webinar there. It's called Developing Resiliency to Get Through Non-Preferred Tasks. Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate it. Is it worth it to practice penmanship for writing avoidance? That's a great question, Monica. I'm going to say I don't really have an answer to that one. Because I think that, occupational therapists will have very strong opinions about that. So I don't want to step on anybody's toes when I don't really have a good answer for that. So you mentioned that most IEP accommodations do not teach the skills of executive functioning. Can you offer some suggestion? So again, I don't give accommodations for, IEPs, 504 plans. If you Google them, you'll find millions of them. But again, my main concern is it helping them towards independence, or is it further enabling their prompt dependence? Melanie said age 6 doesn't believe anything we say, so hard to parent. So is this difficulty seeing things from others' perspective? Yes, Melanie. So kids with ADHD and other social learning challenges like Asperger's, they have difficulty with perspective taking. Okay, I don't think that's what it's about for your son's age. I think for him, it's a way he's learned to get attention from you and get a level of intensity by engaging you in argument. Okay, and again, I'm going to cover that in my next webinar called Raising Great Dudes. Amir said, can you provide some examples of incentives for a 6th grader? So like the ones I showed in that, in that slide before, where was it? Things that, it's something that really he or she has to take ownership of. So things like this, word search puzzle, doing a Fortnite coloring sheet, kinetic sand, Roblox. But it's really based on their interest, and that's, and also kind of what time frame we're talking about. So if it's during virtual learning, and they have, a lunch break, that allows for more time. If it's 10 minutes between classes, then that doesn't allow for so much time. So I see it's 8 o'clock. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Again, I really appreciate it. Please feel free. Where is it? I'm trying to get back to show you my social media stuff. Feel free to come and join the ADHD community. And again, lots of hours of content at my YouTube channel, my Attitude Magazine page. All right. I hope this was helpful to all of you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in my Facebook group.